Welcome back into another edition of EMAW Radio. Mason Voth, managing editor of EMAW Online here, getting ready to start another day covering the Wildcats and bringing you any content that you want on the Cats. A couple of notes. It's been a few days since we've done this. Some weird scheduling things last week, and in addition to that, there was some stuff that took place that I figured needed to give it a little bit of time to breathe, to fully be able to analyze and get everything figured out to see kind of the direction in which things went. And I think that, at this stage, I have that now. So I feel good about it. And we'll cover everything that we need to. The story that is up today that you can go and find on EMA Online is going through and looking at the Big 12 win projections for 2023 that the Vegas odds makers had set for the league. I went through and made the case for the over or the under on both situations, and then gave my take on what I thought was going to happen. Just something that, it gives a little bit of a refresher as to what teams coming into the season are maybe going to have going on and what things could ultimately look like for them. And also just kind of a fun thing to read through. And I know that for a lot of people, this is the kind of stuff that you'll click on and you'll read through and you'll have immediate disagreements and want to voice your opinion on that. That's the point of this. I want anybody that disagrees with anything that I said to, you can tweet me at The Real Mason V. You can go in and you can leave it on the message boards, or, if you say, hey, actually, not a bad point, that is fine too. I will always take being told that I'm right. But for the most part, I know that this is the type of thing that is meant to create, some discussion and some back and forth and people saying this is wrong, that's right. So I'm very interested to see kind of how that ends up playing out and what direction we kind of move other things in. But we won't talk too much about that today. Ultimately, what we are going to talk about more so than anything is going to be Chris Klieman's contract extension that he got. It was officially reported by Pete Thamel from ESPN on Sunday night. And we should be getting word sometime in the near future about that thing being official and word coming from K-State about it. This is something that had been in the works for I don't know, I guess a long time relative to whatever you think a long time means in college football. But I think that this is obviously a big step in a right direction for K-State in terms of what they are trying to accomplish and what they think can be accomplished. We also are acutely aware that Jerome Tang is probably going to be getting his own contract extension and raise and a lot of other things that Chris Klieman just got in the near future. And I think it all just shows the willingness of Gene Taylor and what he sees needing to be done, and that it's important to him to keep the right guys around when you know that you have them. And it does certainly seem like K-State has their two guys for football and basketball right now, and they're going to make whatever moves they can to make sure they stick around. Obviously, Chris Klieman's name came up a couple of times. There were some openings this year. The one that there wasn't, I don't think, any real smoke to it, but obviously the other side wanted to act like it was a real possibility, where when Purdue fans acted like, oh yeah, Chris Klieman, why would he not come to Purdue? Come on, that would be a better job. Shut up, Boilermakers, you're idiots. But regardless, you don't have to worry about that right now, because Chris Klieman is going to be around for a long time. He's going to get paid his money, and everything in this situation adds up to him likely finishing his career at K-State, as long as things don't completely just go haywire and the next 4 seasons are putrid, which I highly doubt will happen given his track record, and especially considering what he's been able to do in his first 4 seasons in Manhattan. But there are a couple of things to note on why this, to me, signals, hey, this guy's going to be here for the rest of his career, or as long as he wants to be here. Number one, the length of this. It now extends for over the next 8 seasons, the contract. This one runs through 2030. So that's significant. Chris Klieman, by the time that season rolls around, he'll be well into his 60s at that point. Kind of crazy to think about that's the position that he would be in at this point. But yeah, he'll be into his 60s at that stage of when this contract comes to a close now in 2030. And in addition to that, this is a guy that has obviously talked about how much he enjoys working for Gene Taylor and how Gene Taylor gives him kind of the reins and lets him do what he needs to do. They have a good working relationship. I think they also just have a good relationship outside of the workplace, and they understand that they work well together and that they also both have full faith and trust in one another. And for Chris Klieman, what that looks like in his faith in Gene Taylor would be something along the lines of all those raises that were delivered for the assistant coaches earlier this year. That also meant that Colin Klein was going to stick around and not end up at a place like Notre Dame or somewhere else. So the resources are being given to Chris Klieman, and obviously Gene Taylor is able to do it with the upgrades that have been made with the new indoor facility and some of the other elements of K-State football. In addition to that, like, Gene Taylor is also now giving him $5.5 million per year. That is pretty substantial. That's a big time commitment to Chris Klieman. And it's just kind of wild to look at where things have come from over the last 5 years, because 5 years ago, heading into that 2018 football season, Bill Snyder's last year, there was a deal that was done with Snyder that elevated his pay to $3.45 million a year. Now, at the time, people were like, why would you give a coach that old an extension, whatever? Ultimately, it was just done so the athletic department could essentially budget to have at least be in the same competitive bracket as a lot of college football jobs throughout the country, where you could say, all right, we know that we have this much money that has to be set aside for the head football coach. Let's start using that money now, as opposed to, having to cut from somewhere else later. So they did that by giving $3.45 million to Bill Snyder. Well, Chris Klieman came in and did a phenomenal job. He got the extension and pay bump that was officially announced after the win at Oklahoma in 2020. So that had him making over $4 million a year. And now this latest pay increase has him up to $5.5 million per year. Now, another reason why it seems tough to believe that Chris Klieman would go anywhere through the duration of this deal. Number one, he will likely get another extension somewhere down the line with another pay increase, if I had to imagine. For as successful as he has been and for what he has done in the way college football works, to me, there's no reason to believe that Chris Klieman is going to continue out and coach the next 8 years over this contract. It would probably be a situation where 3, 4, 5 years from now, we're sitting around and Chris Klieman's gotten another pay increase to where he's up to averaging $6 million a year on the life of the deal, or whatever it may end up being. So that is part of it. But in addition to that, if you go in, and it's a little wonky to try and find what coaches are getting paid around the country, just because there are so many oddities to them. Also, I mean, with the private schools, that throws a wrench in it. But the rough estimate of everything looks like this. This is from a front office sports story in February of this year. So this is fairly recent, should factor in basically every new hire that has taken place. Here is what we know on the top 25 highest paid coaches in the country. So obviously, I would throw the guys in the top 18. They are in kind of a class of their own. All of them are making over $6,750,000 a year. So that starts with Mark Stoops at Kentucky at $6.76 million, and it goes all the way up then, obviously, to Nick Saban, who's making almost $11 million a year at Alabama. There are 4 guys that are presumed to be inside over the $10 million mark. That'd be Dabo Swinney, Kirby Smart, Lincoln Riley, in addition to Saban. Brian Kelly is right on the door there. Mel Tucker at Michigan State. I mean, Mel Tucker, he was able to swindle Michigan State because he had success in one season, and that man is making a lot of money. He better get it figured out pretty quick. Other guys up in that area: Jimbo Fisher, Ryan Day, Josh Heupel, at big time schools that are making around $9 million a year. Now, in relation to the Big 12 and what else is going on here, Mike Gundy is the highest paid coach in the Big 12 at $7.5 million a year. Brent Venables is second at $7 million a year. And then you go down, prior to this deal getting done, it was Steve Sarkisian at Texas. Sarkisian's making $5.4 million a year. So Chris Klieman is now getting paid more than the head football coach at Texas, and he's doing it at K-State. That is a significant number. And what this also means is that Chris Klieman now slides into the 23rd highest paid college football coaching job in the country. And that is huge for him because that shows that he can get paid the money that other places would try to pay him at K-State, a place where he's already won. He has it set up to be more successful in the future, and he has the comfort level of he fits in wonderfully for what the community and the feel around K-State is. He has the perfect athletic director for him. And there's a lot of things that check boxes for Chris Klieman at K-State. And now the other one is he is coaching like one of the best coaches in college football, and he has for a long time, but now he's doing it at the FBS level, and he's proven himself in 4 years that he's taken a K-State team that the year before he took over was 5-7, had issues in how the roster was stacked up, and 4 years later, he has a team that is a Big 12 champion, played in the Sugar Bowl against Alabama, and they are bringing in great talent. They just had their best recruiting class in however long. You have to go back and look and say, oh, man, that was their best recruiting class until now. Like, things are happening for Chris Klieman, and he's doing it all at K-State. And now don't even have to worry about the salary thing because that is also covered at K-State. So that is all significant. Now, what does this mean on the K-State side as a whole? Not just Chris Klieman, but what does this mean from a K-State athletics standpoint? To me, what it signals is despite the fact that there are going to be other schools that have more financial backing and resources, because as we know, like K-State is not going to stack up recruitment-wise to some of these other places. And also like location and so many other factors determine this, but it's not like the I would say the percentage of mega donors is as high as other places. Now, part of that again is just because they have more alums and location and resources and everything else, whatever. But Gene Taylor is making the most of what he has. And this is also should be a credit to every single person in the K-State community. Anybody that's donated $1 to the people at the top that are getting their names put on buildings or jumbotrons or whatever else you want to consider. The level of involvement, and now this kind of stretches into NIL as well, is because of the success and just the overall vibe and the feel of how excited and just great and personable all the people around K-State athletics are right now. The amount of money that everybody is putting in to K-State athletics in any form is also kind of I guess a way to showcase what's going on at K-State. But this shows that K-State has the willingness to find the way to make themselves competitive on the same level that they need to be with other high-end programs or programs that think they're high-end that thought, hey, maybe we can go out and poach a guy. So we know that they're taking care of Chris Klieman now. It likely means that not only is Jerome Tang going to get a bump, but he's going to get taken care of as well. And that is another guy that Gene Taylor is going to do everything in his power to make sure that he is at K-State for as long as he needs to be. So that is all very important. So it's a props to Gene Taylor. It's a props to the fans and the supporters and the boosters and whoever that are kicking in the money. I think another big thing that needs to be highlighted in this is whatever you want to do, a handshake, a tip of the hat, a high five, a hug, whatever, to the new president, Richard Linton at K-State. Because it's so important in these situations to have a president of your university that understands the importance of athletics and is willing to support that in a major way. Look, I know there are people out there that roll their eyes at, oh man, more money for athletics. Kedzie Hall is falling apart. The basement of Eisenhower Hall smells like pee. Guess what? I would over and over again take my classes in the pee-smelling basement of Eisenhower Hall and the falling apart Kedzie Hall to give myself the opportunity to see a winning product on the field or the court for K-State athletics, because I can suck it up for an hour, 3 days a week to go and sit in a, expired and like starting to run down school building. Because ultimately at the end of the day, like the exposure and money that is brought in by your athletics department is the most important thing to these schools. And obviously, there are other ways that it gets supplemented at the level of K-State, a KU, any Big 12 school, any Power 5 school around the country. But at the end of the day, they are still similar in ways to, and now for different reasons, but to the very tiny like NAIA schools in Kansas. So, how is it that a place like, I'm not trying to single any of them out, so I better not just say a name, but how is it that tiny little private school in random small town Kansas is able to make it? Well, it's because they got all these people that are paying a ton of money just to come play sports there. They need their athletics to keep those schools afloat. And at the higher level, it is just as important as that, where they need athletics to keep their schools afloat. Now, it's not because the athletes are paying them an arm and a leg and then their future kids' arm and legs to go and play sports there, but it's because with those successful athletics programs or the ability to have that at your school, it brings people in like me that made my sole decision on where I wanted to go to school because I liked watching K-State football and basketball, and I couldn't have seen myself going somewhere else. So I decided, hey, that's what I want to do. I want to be a part of that. I want to see that. I want to be able to have that. And why has Alabama shot to the top of enrollment and interest and people that are wanting to go there? It's because their football program since 2009 has been on the highest of trajectories up, and that has led to more people wanting to go to school at Alabama that have ever wanted to go there in the past. Like prior to 2009, why would anybody from Ohio or North Carolina wanted to go to Alabama? Maybe there are other reasons, but I can tell you that the number one reason why those kids want to do it now is because they are damn good at football and they're pretty good at basketball too. So it's the same type of deal here where athletics is bringing in a lot of money in a lot of different ways to your school, and you have to support that. You have to support that because at the end of the day, what alums care about the most, I think, just from my understanding and the way I see it, is how successful your athletics programs are. And that money will spill into other areas where, hey, look, we've taken care of athletics, but, and the school's in a really good spot. We're moving up. But we do still need to support these other areas. That can be the pitch that's made by a university president. And in turn, that will bring money into other areas of the school. So it's just incredibly important to get back to my original point that I was making here, that Richard Linton has come in, and it seemed like from all indications, he had the background and the right makeup to be the president of K-State after his experience that he had at NC State. But now I think we are seeing what a difference it makes to have a president that is so involved in understanding of what athletics means to the university. It's no longer just Richard Myers showing up with dyed purple hair and waving his hand at people and acting like, yeah, woo, let's win. Behind the scenes, I don't think Richard Myers was actually as supportive as he needed to be in that regard. I think Richard Linton is, and that's a totally another reason why K-State is in this position right now. I think that they have in the four most important positions at any school, they have the right president in place, they have the right athletic director in place, they have the right football coach in place, and they have the right men's basketball coach in place. If you have those four things going for you, there's going to be a lot of success that comes your way. And I feel really good about what K-State has done at this point in time, and they're showing it right now. So it's just incredible to think of where things have come from, where in a 5-year stretch, the head football coach at K-State is now getting paid over $2 million more in that stretch. So they've added $2 million to that role in a 5-year span. It's likely going to go up in the future, and that's all because of, the guys that I just laid out there. So very important, very notable, and it just means that K-State's in a really good spot. And as long as something unforeseen and crazy doesn't happen, this is going to continue. This is going to be something that keeps up, and the success and everything else that goes with it going to be in a really good spot. So that is the thoughts on everything going on with Chris Klieman and his pay bump. Now, here are some of the things that are going along and around the rest of the league that I was going to wait until we got a little bit more clarity on, or at least a little bit more understanding of, before discussing yesterday. So we now have another gambling note scandal, whatever you want to call it, in college athletics. It's no longer just Alabama, which, by the way, I wrote about the Alabama situation in Monday Thoughts yesterday, because it's just so fascinating to me about what has gone on. Here's kind of a breakdown of what Alabama has had happen. So last week, they had the initial report that there was an odd wager that was placed in Ohio, something out of the norm. It was being investigated, and it ultimately ended in Alabama's baseball coach being fired because he was allegedly on the phone with the person that made the odd bet, which was a bet for LSU, not Alabama, in the LSU-Alabama game, after Alabama started a pitcher that hadn't started a game since mid-March, and they pulled their Friday starter for that game. So there was some red flags there. Well, in addition to that, Alabama's deputy athletic director, Matt Self, was arrested and charged with third-degree domestic violence last week as well, the guy that oversees Alabama's football program and compliance department. Now, remember, this is all in addition to the Brandon Miller and other stuff attached to the murder that took place involving, in some way, members of the Alabama basketball team or former members of the Alabama basketball team. Don't forget that in between the betting and the deputy AD and Brandon Miller, that they also brought in a transfer from Wichita State, Jaquan Walton, who was arrested just days after committing to Alabama. He was arrested by Tuscaloosa police when they found marijuana and multiple firearms in Walton's possession in his car. He's been kicked off the team, so he transferred. He probably wasn't even doing anything remotely close to being a student at Alabama yet, and that's what happened. So the Alabama situation kind of was the whetting of our appetite into some odd gambling things taking place involving colleges and what's going on there. Well, now we get this. Yesterday, Iowa State, they snuck out a little release with something else that happened yesterday that I'm about to talk about. But they made notice that multiple Iowa State athletes, including football players, allegedly participated in online gambling as more cases started to kind of come up, because we know that the Iowa Gaming Commission is looking into not just Iowa State, but also Iowa with some things that have happened. Now, sports betting in Iowa has been legal for like close to 5 years now. So that's just something to note. It's been around a little bit longer there. So in addition to having football players, wrestling, and track athletes that were involved in the rule breaking, there haven't been any details of what violations were, but they're being investigated. And Iowa State said the university has notified the NCAA and will take the appropriate actions to resolve these issues. So athletes aren't allowed to place their wagers because of the NCAA rules to avoid potential conflicts of interest or any tampering in competitions that can maybe be accused. So that is going on with Iowa State, where they may have some guys that are no longer eligible to play because they maybe were betting on games. Now, it should be pointed out, there is a chance that they weren't even betting on college football. In all likelihood, they probably weren't. I really have a tough time thinking. Now, I guess maybe later in the season when you realized it was a lost cause, maybe you would have decided to start placing some wagers that you thought could work out. But they could have been doing it on another sport, whatever. It's still a no-no in terms of what the NCAA sees in question. Now, the one thing to consider in all this is this should be something that kind of gives a good reset and a good time to, have one of those like all school assemblies that you used to have when like a couple of kids were like repeatedly doing something bad at school. It's like, we need to bring all the kids in to the gym and talk about this real quick. Like at my elementary school, well, it wasn't the whole school. It was just all of the boys in the school, all the 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. We got called into the gym one morning. All the girls went to class like normal, and the principal stood up in front of us, and he got on the mic, and he just said, "Who's been peeing in the drain in the bathroom? It's got to stop." Basically just this whole talk, because there were a handful of guys that in this one bathroom at the front of the school, there was just a drain in the middle of the floor. So if there was, a toilet that flooded or something, the water would just go to that and drain through. And, instead of just using the toilets that were in there, there were some guys that were just going in the drain. So we got a good talking to from our principal. It didn't really do much because there wasn't like a ton of respect for, that the principal there or whatever. And also like your elementary school boys. So yeah, you shouldn't be doing it, but it is kind of funny that people were doing it. I was not one of them. I want to make that clear. You guys could probably assume I'm a little bit of a rules follower. I'm afraid of consequences. So I was not, but still very funny to look back on and think of. Now, would I be disappointed if my child was doing that? Yes, I probably would. But this is a good opportunity for K-State, KU, any of these schools in states that have legal sports betting to have this little assembly, bring all the athletes in and say, hey, look, I know that you're not doing it or a lot of you aren't doing it, but just be aware of what can happen here and make sure you absolutely stay away from this. Very important to do and gives a good opportunity and good chance to give some real life examples. Now let's flip around to the big news in the Big 12 yesterday that started to go down just before Iowa State was like, hey, let's sneak this in here real quick. Like, yeah, hey, we may have some athletes that are betting on sports. They may have lost their eligibility because of the big news that was going on in college athletics in the Big 12 yesterday is the fact that Bob Huggins went on a radio show and said some very, very bad things. And now he is going to be under review by West Virginia, and we'll see ultimately what ends up happening. Now, I'm obviously not going to say what Bob Huggins said. Just know that he essentially offended two different groups of people in what he said. He offended one religious group and he offended another group of people as well. And ultimately, it's not really that he just offended those groups, but when you say something like that, it just offends people in general because at the end of the day, just be a decent human. Like, you don't need to like throw nasty language and whatever else at people in general. Like, just be a good person. So, yeah, whatever. We'll let you decide on how you feel about all that. But he goes on a radio show, doubles down on what he says. He says it multiple times, and now he is under review from West Virginia about what he said. Now, here is what and if you want to see everything that went down, a good recap of it is up at Awful Announcing. It's the first story on their page about Bob Huggins and what he said during his radio interview. He was on in Cincinnati. Obviously, he was the head coach at Cincinnati for a long time. He was on with a radio show that had a Xavier supporter or grad or whatever that hosted the show. And these two obviously have somewhat of a good relationship where they go back and forth a lot or whatever, and they get, what happens. Well, there's a lot to unpack to what was said there, and it's all just not very good. It's one of those things that if I was still doing radio, there would be a lot of looks around, whether it was John, Mitch, and I just being like, what is going on here? Like, we got to stop this. There were times where that would happen. Someone would call in and be like, hey, this is the radio. You can't say some of those words. Maybe the time that we did the interview with Jason Brown, the disgraced Indy football coach, who, by the way, said some really bad things that got him fired from his job there, that luckily we pre-recorded that one where you just kind of go, what is going on here? So that happens. Very rarely, though, does the radio host actually jump in and start to maybe say some of the questionable things. The main point here is there is the chance, and this is not, people will not overreact when they are upset at what Bob Huggins said, and that they say that there needs to be discipline that takes place for Bob Huggins. There absolutely does have to be, because you should never say something like that. You absolutely can't say it on the radio, and you certainly can't say it if you are a public figure like Bob Huggins. It's just, it can't happen. Now, the one thing that I will say is I don't think Bob Huggins is going to lose his job over this. Yes, we have seen, even recently, guys be in bad spots because of this. Tom Brenneman in 2020 in Kansas City, he lost his job over it. The Oakland A's play-by-play guy, totally different deal for him because it absolutely seems like it was just the absolute worst, like tongue-tied moment in history. But he's been suspended indefinitely. He has a review process that are going on with the A's. Like, there is evidence of this recently. And if you are in a certain job where you can be replaced, even though you may be really good at it, you can still be replaced. People are going to dump you. And that's what happened to Tom Brenneman. There are thousands upon thousands of people that want to be broadcasters out there, and thousands upon thousands of them that are talented enough to be the voice of the Cincinnati Reds. Obviously, Fox had no trouble filling his role on their NFL and baseball coverage. And like at the end of the day, like what Tom Brenneman said was terrible, but like I can also say, I wish I could still hear Tom Brenneman call games. Like, he's got a great voice. He's iconic for his call in the Fiesta Bowl with Boise State. Like, there was a lot of things there, but you say what you say, and if you say it at all and it gets picked up anywhere, like, you're in trouble. And that's just how it works. Like, it's not unfair to that person. Like they said it, they did it. They have to be aware of the consequences, not to go down this road too much, but like that's, yes, you can say whatever you want in this country, but you're not free of consequence from what you say. It's like, I can say whatever I want at my parents' house when I was growing up, but if it ended with me going to my room for an hour because I said something I wasn't supposed to, that's the consequence of me saying something that I wanted to say. So here's the deal with everything that's going on with the Bob Huggins thing. I doubt West Virginia fires him because he is up there as one of their top guys of all time. He is their greatest son, at least in terms of he played there, he's coached there, he took him to a Final Four, he's had them on this consistent run, he's a basketball Hall of Famer, like all of these things. I doubt Bob Huggins gets fired for this. But there are going to have to be disciplinary actions that get taken on Bob Huggins, and there's going to have to be a lot that goes on. The apology and the statements yesterday from West Virginia and Bob Huggins, they weren't the strongest. None of these really ever are, but that's also, I will give some leeway, and it's really tough to make those statements after you've said or done something bad that make up for what you've said or done. Like, you're just not going to win either way. So the best way to go about this is Bob Huggins is just going to have to lead by example. He's going to have to truly learn from this. And West Virginia is going to have to be comfortable giving him some kind of punishment in some way. We'll just see what it ends up being, because at the end of the day, we know that these schools don't come down too terribly hard on people that do wrong things. I mean, Mark Few got a slap on the wrist for his DUI, and he's leading the Gonzaga basketball team. It's just what happens in these situations. But very much not a great deal. Here is what the statement from Bob Huggins was yesterday. This was put out by West Virginia. He said, earlier today on a Cincinnati radio program, I was asked about the rivalry between my former employer, the University of Cincinnati, and its crosstown rival Xavier. During the conversation, I used a completely insensitive and abhorrent phrase that there is simply no excuse for, and I won't try to make one here. I deeply apologize to the individuals I have offended, as well as to the Xavier University community, the University of Cincinnati, and West Virginia University. As I have shared with my players over my 40 years of coaching, there are consequences for our words and actions, and I will fully accept any coming my way. I am ashamed and embarrassed and heartbroken for those I have hurt. I must do better, and I will. So here's the deal at the end of the day. A lot of people like Bob Huggins, and a lot of people prior to this, I don't think would have said anything terrible about Bob Huggins. And given where he's at West Virginia, it doesn't seem likely that he's going to lose his job there. Now, maybe I'll be surprised. They have a new athletic director, so we'll see how things change. But I have a really tough time believing that he loses his job over that. So anybody that was worried about that, you don't have to be worried about that. But it does seem like in some way there will be a punishment. There has to be, and we'll see how West Virginia and Bob Huggins and everybody else moves on from it. It's just not great yesterday in the Big 12 with a couple of the notes going on. The one thing that you can thank your lucky stars about, though, is that none of those two bad things happened at K-State. So there you go. The Cats, what did we talk about today? K-State is now paying their football coach $5.5 million a year because he's a hot commodity in the game and he won a Big 12 title. Why did we talk about Iowa State and West Virginia? Well, their players may have been betting on sports, and their head basketball coach said some really bad, insensitive things. I would rather be K-State than Iowa State and West Virginia on these days. So just remember that. And we'll be back later this week with another edition of EMAW Radio. Stay locked in to EMAW Online over at Rivals. If you're not signed up, go do it at kansasstate.rivals.com and get all the K-State coverage that you want, can supplement everything you need. And go take a look at the over-unders and win projections for the Big 12 this year and my thoughts on all of those. Those are up. That is a free story on EMAW Online today. So you can go over there. Anybody can see it. It's a good kind of precursor to maybe get people engaged. And if you don't know what is going on at EMAW Online, stuff like that. Also some more in-depth stuff as well. So that is what we have going on. That'll do it for this edition of EMAW Radio. I'm Mason Voth, and I'll talk to you later this week.